it was like doing a off-Broadway play. You had to be ready to go for anything at that moment. Everyone, like PAs were holding lights and things, like everyone just wanted to work. And it just was so inspiring. And we did this thing where it was family dinners. So we got to know everyone on a personal level and kind of be a part of this little baby in a time where no one was working. It was during the strike, and we got all the waivers and did all this. And I think that was really special, as opposed to the like 500-person crews, which is great, but you just don't see it all. It just becomes a job, a job, a job. This was one of those things where if you have time and you can lend a hand, you lend a hand. And it was really, really cool to see that. And from that, we got a fun result of it. And I think it plays in making these super indie films and really honing that.
So first and foremost, congratulations on the film. I am curious about a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's really a film that's I expected to be the tone to shift a little differently than it did. I expected there was a lot of plants that made you think it was going to be a full-on horror movie, right? Like a slasher film. Everything from the sort of bloodied face flashes at the VMAs to the cryptic warning about nobody gets out of the castle alive or whatever in the French pub. So I'm curious. It kind of pans out into a psychodrama about the creative process, right? About fame. You're the actors, but I assume you know where this came from in terms of the writer, producer, directors, and where this thing originated. Any ideas?
I actually don't. I signed on to this movie late to play Miles, so I just took the impetus of what that means to elevate in success, which I think we've all probably been through, leaving acting schools or fellow actors and being like, yeah, we got to climb this ladder when it's hot. Who do I want to win with? And that was kind of my journey of this film, where the other ones came from. I don't know. What do you guys think, huh? You were in it more than me.
From what Galen and Charlie told us, the writers of it, they were in the pandemic and they were, depressed that they weren't able to work and do what they love, and they decided to write this together and like spend an hour a day writing no matter what. And finally it ended up being this, and they were able to get all of their friends involved to make it, and it ended up being a really, really cool project.
Yeah, I think it came about because they wrote what they know. Galen's actually an actor. We did a film together years ago called Band Slam that Charlie was actually in, and Tim Joe. And I think Galen kind of just wanted to get out of the acting world and start, directing and creating his own projects. And it is really what they know, like, the ups and downs of being creative.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I found it very, very cool that it didn't turn into a slasher movie, because I feel like there's so many slasher movies out there that it had the tonality, but then kind of took a turn that was much more psychological than a horror movie. So tell us how each of you came to the project, or the project came to you.
They sent me the script, I think, just a couple months before I signed on. And at first I thought they were just going to have me be a day player and come in as like the drummer or something. And they sent it to me and were like, we want you to play the lead. But yeah, like I said, we'd known each other for like 15 years at this point. So although we didn't keep in touch that much, once they sent it to me, I think at the first phone call, actually, they were like, you want to go to a 1,000-year-old castle in France? And I was like, yeah, I don't even need to read it. Sign me up. But yeah, once I did, I obviously loved it and yeah, signed on.
I knew Allie, who played Kristen, the drummer, through the music scene of Los Angeles at the time, and we were at an event, and she had pitched just meeting Galen and Charlie, so we took a Zoom. I hadn't had the script, and I met these two young, hungry filmmakers. I knew nothing about them, and from that Zoom, I'm like, I want to work with them. Then read the script and Miles's little arc. I think his name is mentioned more than I have screen time, so I'm like, it's a cool little journey, and then getting to read it, I'm like, I'm in. We get to go to France. I get to meet this new team of people. Let's go to work. So, yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, I was like a faint acquaintance of Charlie. I wasn't, I didn't go as far back as these guys did, and I didn't know anyone else. My first ever job as an actor, I was 12 years old, and I worked on a super avant-garde play, and it was at a playhouse that had multiple showrooms, and Charlie was in a different play, and we had just kind of passed each other in like this shared green room that we had. Never saw each other again after that. And then 12 years later, a couple of my film student friends and I, we went to see a double feature of 2 French films at the New Beverly in LA. And in between the 2 films, I just ran into him and I was like, "Hey, how you doing? You probably don't remember me." And we got to, get to knowing each other again. We messaged each other on Instagram, and he's like, "Hey, I'm making this movie in France. Do you want to audition for it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing nothing right now," because it was in the middle of the strike. And then, yeah, it's just crazy, divine intervention, happenstance, whatever you want to call it. And then I was out in France 2 months later. So, very cool. Yeah.
So in terms of auditioning, did you actually audition, or they just offered you guys the roles?
This offer. Yeah.
Okay.
Same offer.
And
No.
Awkward.
We're so happy though.
yeah.
We got the best guy.
That was the third choice, right? Yeah.
Couldn't get the first 2.
Yeah, I did a 30-minute Zoom session with them. It was, Charlie here in LA, and then Galen at like 2 a.m. in France on a Zoom. And we just worked through every scene. He gave me his notes. We just worked on stuff, and he gave me great feedback. And I was like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. And luckily, it was one of the ones that I got to work on. So.
And any idea, was the rest of the cast pretty much cast similarly through like friendship, through relationships, through say, "Hey, come," or there was no casting call necessarily?
Yeah, I know Timmy was written for Tim. Actually wasn't written for me. My character's name was Richard. And
So who's Richard?
Exactly. I took offense to it. I actually changed the character's name to Ryan because Charlie was playing Charlie and Tim was playing Tim, and we were all in Band Slam together. I felt left out. I was like, I got to be Richard. I can't be in the club.
All right, good. Well, so and
I kept Miles.
Yeah, why didn't you?
And obviously, there's a lot of everyone's a musician for the most part in the cast, right? So, was how much of your own musicianship did you bring to what you were doing? I mean, obviously, you're playing, you're singing. What was that? Did they needed musicians, right? So did they audition you as a musician as well, or they just knew you?
Well, the movie we did, Band Slam, we actually all had to play as well. So Tim's an incredible guitar player. Charlie plays multiple instruments. Galen's actually a great instrumentalist. He plays everything too. And I actually am not a very good guitar player at all. I had to take lessons to get it down. I mean, I can fake it and noodle, but I'm not a great guitar player. So Tim actually recorded a lot of the guitars. However, I did do the vocals. So, yeah.
No, I grew up in rock bands before acting, so I just kind of, in this I played bass, and it wasn't really much in the film, but for any of the shots we did get, I'm like, this is so fun. I grew up a drummer in rock bands, but I noodled and everything, so this was just wearing a different hat and applying it. The rock star energy though comes from being musicians, I think, where I'm like, you can't really fake this. You put us on stage, we had little French fans thinking we were actually playing a concert, and it was all backtracked, and it was so fun. So yeah.
I was never in a band, if you can't tell by looking at me. But
I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. But I at my private middle school, I was first chair electric bass for my school orchestra. So I think that's that's something to brag about. Thank you. I stop. And yeah, again, just I played a little bit, messed around, and then when I got this, the first couple days we were at the castle, we just kind of stayed up super late, just kind of jamming all the songs that we had to play together. And Tim kind of retaught me how to play bass, and he also recorded it with a pick. I've never played bass with a pick before. I didn't even know that was a thing. And so I was just learning, so much new stuff, but it was like literally like in the movie, just kind of like getting to know the band and becoming really good friends, and yeah, just getting to feel like I was in a rock band.
I mean, it's. I mean, for me personally, it was a little triggering because I used to manage a couple punk bands in town, a couple like highly dysfunctional punk bands in terms of their interpersonal relationships. It also reminded me a bit of the Metallica documentary where they all go to a therapist together. Have you guys been in dysfunctional bands, and like, did you bring any of that into what you were doing on set?
So after we did Band Slam, Tim, Joe, and I were actually in a band together for about 8 years, and we played all over LA. And then once our band broke up, Tim, Joe, and Charlie got in a band together, and they still play. So a lot of the fights were real. Like we had those arguments multiple times in real life, and so we just drew on that energy.
Yeah, I'm an actor by accident. I was in a dysfunctional band that led me to Los Angeles and inevitably got me cast in something. I'm like, oh, this pays way more. This is great. And then I learned, So, but yeah, I've been through it, so I think it's fun to play those.
And the drama and dysfunctionality of a middle school orchestra band is also very crazy. Everyone fighting over whose first chair, oh, you messed up this song. We got to practice it again. We're staying 10 minutes late. Just like you guys, right?
Same.
So I noticed that the crew was only about 11 people. Is that right? Yeah. So can you talk about the upsides and the downsides of working? Like how many days did you shoot? Did it limit takes? Like how different was it working with this size crew? And what were the ups and downs of that?
I joined late in this film, so I'll speak from my experience of what I came into. It was like doing a off-Broadway play. You had to be ready to go for anything at that moment. Everyone, like PAs were holding lights and things. Like everyone just wanted to work, and it just was so inspiring. And we did this thing where it was family dinners, so we got to know everyone on a personal level and kind of be a part of this little baby in a time where no one was working. It was during the strike, and we got all the waivers and did all this, and I think that was really special as opposed to the 500-person crews, which is great, but you just don't see it all. It just becomes a job. This was one of those things where if you have time and you can lend a hand, you lend a hand. And it was really, really cool to see that. And from that, we got a fun result of it. And I think it plays in making these super indie films and really honing that. So,
yeah, it was pretty incredible actually to see how hard everyone worked. Like everyone wore a bunch of different hats. I was a grip at one point. Like everybody just put in their all. And we did a bunch of guerrilla stuff. Like we kept trying to get this sunset shot. And I remember it was one night we were all having dinner, and somebody comes in, they're like, sunset. And so I literally just jumped up, and me and the DP and Galen, I threw on the jacket and put some blood on and just ran out, and we got the shot, And there was a lot of that, a lot of just like run and gun, like get it if we can get it, and shoot. And yeah.
And do you know how many days you guys shot in all? Any idea?
It was like a month all in all, I want to say, something like that.
Very short. Yeah. There's not much to add, but it was such a unique experience we were living at the castle we were filming at, all of us together, having breakfast, lunch, and dinner together in like the middle of nowhere. So we never saw a soul for like 3 weeks. And it was crazy to just like you said, everyone is just all hands on deck, wanting to make something cool, something amazing. And it was such a great experience. And it was like we were like a family at the end. It was awesome.
So speaking of the set, speaking of the castle, so a couple questions. So any idea why this could have been shot in a number of different types of places. Any idea why they chose a castle in France?
Well, Galen lives in France. He lives, I want to say like an hour away from that castle. So he was scouting different castles, and he happened to find this one, which is owned by Miles Copeland, which is Stuart Copeland's brother from The Police, the drummer, and he also was their manager for a long time. So he has a bunch of platinum plaques up in one of the secret rooms hidden under the stage. But I think that also, because it was his castle, he used to have a recording studio there. Immediately, Galen was like, this is the spot. This is the one, if we can get it. And yeah.
And was it all designed already, or did you guys have
Oh
to bring
yeah.
stuff in?
No, Miles went. No, we didn't touch anything. We had like all the suits of armor. He had everything was exactly how it looks.
He lives in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was crazy too because they were just in doing research to make the film. They were watching a bunch of old documentaries about bands and stuff, and they, before they ever met Miles, watched a documentary. I forget, what was it called? But it was, and he was in it, and he was just this like crazy personality. And then one day Galen's location scouting, and he's like, "You're not going to believe, we found a castle, and it's Miles' castle." And it's just like, well, it has to be that one. Like we're not going to choose any other castle but that one.
Well, the way Galen tells it too, he was like, "You're not going to believe who owns this castle." And Charlie just immediately goes, "Miles Copeland," and he was like, "Yes, it's exactly right." And I think they had watched it like 2 days before.
Yeah, it was like right before.
Yeah.
And was that his picture of Cher on the wall?
That's actually CG'd.
Oh, really? It's
So there is one of the towers is dubbed the Cher Tower because she went and wrote a bunch of songs there. Yeah, and so we kept saying like the DP was actually staying in the Cher Tower. So we kept referencing Cher or whatever, and we were like, man, hope maybe we could get the rights. She'll let us use it. And sure enough, they called and she was like, sure.
How funny! Wow, how funny! And so I found the Rick Rubin based character very, very funny, very interesting. But I'm curious about. I mean, it's such an extreme character, such a controlling character, but it also was played by the writer and producer of the film. So did that create any problems on set or any issues or any sort of extra synergy on set that he was also sort of in charge?
Charlie is incredible at wearing multiple hats. He just went in like he was that character and then delegated what he needed during the film days, and then he could just switch out on off takes. It was amazing to see. But he'd drop into being this super pretentious, fun guy, and then right into bubbly Charlie, who's just getting stuff done. So we never really had conflict of producer, actor, wearing the multiple hats.
And I mean, what about writer? There were no.
No, he was pretty free. That's what I meant by like, I felt like we were in the room creating these moments. I know we had a big scene by the end there, and we went through the scripted version, we went through a rewrite, and then we went through ours. And that's when he came out and he's like, just let that work.
So was there a lot of that? Was a lot of what you were speaking scripted, or was there a lot of improvisation, or a little bit of both?
I would say both. I ended up cutting a lot of my lines. I was like, I don't need to say that. I don't need to say that. But and then I added some stuff like, I wanted the tension to be high when I'm finally like burning it down and basically kicking them out, being like, you should leave. And I added a bunch of those lines because it was written to where I wasn't that much of an asshole. And I was like, I have to stick the dagger in or they're just going to stay. Like I have to burn this thing down and get them to leave. And Galen, I know, was worried about that scene specifically. He's like, I don't want them to think you're an asshole. I was like, but I have to do this or, it's not going to arc.
Which is great. I mean, that's a good collaborative point right there, right? That you have directors actually listening to you and go in that direction with you.
Oh yeah, they were freeing for sure. They let us do a lot.
Great. And any again, you may not know all the answers to these, but any clue why they chose the early aughts to set this in? What and even if you don't know why, what did that do to you guys as characters and as in that world?
Just setting it in the timeline? Is it? Yeah.
Time where it was in. I mean, it was very specific about where we were in the world and what kind of music we're talking about.
So my character's in the 1996 journey of this, and I think the coolest thing about that is there was no white noise. You know what I mean? There was no media in your face. It was just like, oh, this band came. Meanwhile, you didn't know, like, Excelsis. They toured for years to get that one shot. Where now we see everything. We have TikTok. We have media everywhere. We're like, I watched the rise and then fall on this. It was a cool time to just be direct with choices, to be like, oh, he will be this megastar they're talking about in 2003 just by the way the industry is going. It limited us with technology, like phone calls and things like that. It was so freeing to go back to the things I grew up with and be like, and people carried themselves differently. It was freeing, we those rock stars were rock stars. They lived it all day. They weren't worried about media unless it was press or paparazzi. And you're like, this is so cool. We don't have to worry about a cell phone in our face. I think that's also just what we grew up listening to, especially Charlie and Galen. Like that's just the era we love. So,
Yeah, I concur.
It caused me to do a lot of research because I was born in 1998, so I didn't relate as much to it. But great era, great, yeah.
great era, guys.
But to speak to like you said about like no cell phones, like we actually like had to like redo a couple takes because we would ad lib sometimes and make a modern reference. We're like, well, we can't say that. Let's try it again. And it was fun to not make a bunch of modern references and be on our phones all the time, and yeah.
And how about with going back to the music? Did you guys have a lot of time to rehearse? And even even not just the music? Did you have a lot of time to rehearse the scenes?
Not a ton of time to rehearse the scenes. The music we actually recorded in LA with this guy Adam Lazis, who also worked on Bandslam years ago. And so we had a lot of time to sit with that. And I brought my own little mini recording studio and changed some of the vocals on site while we were there. I just brought a mic with me and because Galen wanted some little flourishes or whatever. So we had a lot of time to like flesh that out, but the scenes, it was like, okay, we got to get it. We got to move. But again, because it was so like we could ad lib and we could play with the scene and find what works, we were able to find it pretty fast, I feel like.
We did have like a few days before we started shooting where we just were hanging out at a different Airbnb. We did a table read and we kind of worked through stuff that we felt was a little weird or, felt off. And then, like I said, when we first got to the castle, we had a couple nights to practice being a band together, actually for real playing the music before we had to film all that. So it wasn't, months of preparation, but we definitely had enough time to get to know each other.
So, from reading the script early on, did the film change considerably from script to shooting it through post? I mean, are you watching pretty much what you were shown on a piece of paper, or were there big leaps of between each section, as can happen?
I would say definitely, like I was saying, dialogue. Like a lot of dialogue changed, but the arc of it and the through line was there. It was on the page.
Yeah, the fundamentals didn't change. I only had a couple drafts by the time I joined the film, and like he said, yeah, when me and Ryan found our scene, we just went with it. We knew what was happening, and we used kind of our own obligations in those moments. And we both dealt with that in past lives, being on the receiving and the giving side of that scene. And we're like, let's talk this through, and we just nailed it a few times. So like, keep going. And I'm like, okay, so we got to really go through that. But no, the arc of this film is pretty much the same, yeah.
So any tips for being on location and overseas for actors?
Ooh, if you're going to film in an 1,000-year-old castle, bring a mask, because we've been talking about this a lot in press, but there's 1,000-year-old mold in these walls. And so we had this thing.
We dubbed it Castle Cough.
Yeah, good old David Castlecough.
Yeah.
It was deep.
Everyone had it. Everyone, and about 24 hours after we got out of the castle, everyone was fine. But yeah, it was pretty brutal. Don't go to a castle that's that old if you can help it, and don't stay on the very top floor when you do it. My wardrobe was also in my room on the top floor, so in between scenes, I was climbing about 10 flights of stairs all day.
Stairs weren't perfectly invented that long ago, so they're different heights, and
it was a little rough. I think half the cast and crew. We asked them what their least favorite thing about the project was, and they said stairs.
Yeah. And I would say, I don't think that anyone else on the film set knows this. If you're going to put on a suit of armor, put clothing on underneath. It cut. And so, yeah, it was good. Yeah, there's some layers on. So.
Yeah. And don't be afraid of spiders or bats or
squirrels.
Bats.
Yeah, squirrels. There was a lot of... Yeah.
And spiders
a lot of things
like
in this castle,
that.
guys. So, CG.
Yeah.
All right, and forgive me if I missed something, but do we know exactly who it was that stole Ryan's song in the end?
who stole it? I don't. We never really talked about that. So no, we don't know.
I'm assuming it's. I'm sorry. What's the Rick Rubin guy? What's his
Charlie.
Charlie, right?
Yeah.
That's the assumption, but we don't know, right?
Well, I can't remember which
Whose
version.
ass did you go kick after that last scene?
I think. Well, I think it's the version 2 that I record at the pub. I think that's the version that.
No, it had drums and
Oh,
stuff.
it did?
Yeah, it was a good version.
Well, see, in the
I think
original,
Miles
maybe
came
that-
in and took that song. I think Charlie sold it to Miles and
There you
had
go.
more to
That
success.
sounds right, actually.
Yeah.
All right, good. All right, and lastly, what's going on with this film now? Where should everybody tell their friends to go see it?
It's streaming. You can get it VOD on Apple or Amazon or other places you can buy and rent movies.
Very good. All right, congratulations, fellas.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Regards to the filmmakers.
Coming.
All right.